Hello and welcome to the Academy of Modern Martial Arts and our step-by-step Tai Chi instruction. Today we're going to look at movement number 12 of the 24 movement form, High Pat on Horse. This is another movement that utilizes the half step or the slide forward, as well as the very obvious rotational synergy of push-pull. Additionally, this movement is an excellent time to also explore the spherical nature of simultaneously lifting and grounding that is meant to be present throughout all of our Tai Chi practice. So let's go ahead and begin by examining the footwork for high pat on horse. If you recall, we finished with single whip, and in single whip, we have enough width to our stance, enough depth to our stance, and our weight is relatively 50-50. We're going to have to move all of our weight over the lead leg, empty the rear leg, draw the rear leg up, and then bring our weight back to the rear leg. In order to do that, we want to be incredibly mindful of what's happening with our pelvis. As before, we're going to let go of the hand movements for a moment and just focus on placing our hands on our hips so that we're acutely aware of our pelvis itself. We've talked before about not wanting to lean forward to bring our weight forward, and also not wanting to allow that abdomen to relax and the pelvis to tip forward, but rather to create some abdominal activation by lifting up on the front of that pelvis. And lifting up on that front of that pelvis can help us lift up out of that sternum. So with those two pieces in place and our hands on our hips, we're just going to work on getting these level hips over that lead leg. And so moving from the rear leg, pushing through the foot, and then even if necessary, all the way through the right toe. Once that right leg is empty, we can draw that right leg up behind us, and then we'll sink back down from heel to toe, and we're going to allow that right foot to be at about a 45. As we come back onto the right leg, we empty that lead leg, and we demonstrate that by coming out of the heel on the front leg. One more time, simple slide or half step forward with our hands on our hips. Use the right rear leg to push our weight forward, and you'll notice the hips are not just coming forward, they're also becoming centered over that support leg. Rear leg comes up, we drop back onto that right rear leg, sinking down, and as we're settling down into that leg, we end up pulling up out of that left lead leg. Nicely done. Let's look at it from the side one more time. Here we are, activating that pelvis and lifting up out of that sternum, hands on hips, push through that rear leg, get our hips centered over the left, draw that right leg up, sink back onto that right leg, and come out of the left leg. Nicely done. Let's add the hands. So from high single whip, looking straight on, we're going to rotate our palms. So as we rotate our palms upward, although we're not really working the arms, we do want to think about sinking and allowing both the elbows and the shoulders to drop with the upward raise of the palms. So once again, we're here, and we just raise the palms up, and we use that as a physical cue to remind us to settle through the shoulders and the elbows and have this downward sinking or grounding energy. We're going to move our weight forward with that rear foot, and we're also going to bend at the right elbow to bring that right hand up with the right leg. Once the leg is up, we're going to drop back onto that right leg, and as we set down, we're going to get that push-pull where we pull from the left side and push through the right, rotating our weight down onto that leg. And in this particular case, we want the left hand to be drawn to right around the low rib line, and the right hand is going to pass or just meet the center line, and we're going to really accentuate the edge of our palm. Once more, we're here, we're settled, we're lifted in the front, we rotate the palms and we sink through the shoulders and the elbows. We lower our weight forward and we draw the empty right leg up in synchronicity with that hand. So that comes up. We drop back down onto the right leg and sink and pull and push. And we have this nice rotational synergy for high pat the horse. From the side, high single whip. We're settled into place. And again, one more time, rotate the palms upward and use that as a cue to relax through the elbows and the shoulders, allow us to sink into that lead leg, draw the foot and hand up together, and sink back down onto that right leg, rotating and twisting, and emptying the left lead leg. So to this very obvious rotational synergy that comes from pushing and pulling, we add the fact that it's a rotation, and not only is it a rotation, but it's a corkscrew down into the floor. And that corkscrewing down is a great invitation for us to look at this notion of spherical balance. So it's not just left and right, it's not just outward and inward, it's also up and down. Almost constantly in Tai Chi, there are moments or elements where we are invited to pitch forward or to lose ourselves forward, where the movement or the gesture invites us to lose our balance. And so one of the ways that we counteract that, or one of the ways that we maintain our balance in Tai Chi, is through this notion of spherical balance. Not only are we balancing left and right, not only are we balancing outward, extending outward while pulling inward with the shoulder blades, we're also balancing this notion of sinking or grounding while lifting up in the front. So if we look at that from the side of the body, we're almost always in Tai Chi going to be lifting up out of that pelvis. That's one of those postural cues that we talked about. And that notion of lifting up from the front of that pelvis encourages us and can remind us to also lift up out of our sternum, which then in turn sets those shoulders down, which allows us to sink and relax and open the low back. And then again, so we pull up in the front and we lift and we drop the shoulders and we relax through the torso. And so we also have a circle that runs this way. If we can think about balance in this spherical way, we find that everything keeps tying us back into our center, and we come from a very grounded position. Anytime we think about a movement or a gesture as being a push or a strike, there's a potential temptation to think about generating force outward in one particular direction. However, if we're trying to generate force in one particular direction, whether that's a push or a strike, we can end up putting all of our energy forward, and there's nothing that really keeps us in place. When that happens, we can end up, if we overextend and we imbalance ourselves that way, we're much more influenced by somebody else's efforts upon our body, not to mention possibly being off balance by ourselves. Case in point, we've talked about it before, this particular half step or slide forward. In the effort to move our weight from being centered to being over the lead leg, there's a temptation to sort of lean forward in that motion. So if we were in single whip and we rotate our palms and we sink through those shoulders, or maybe we forget to sink. So we just sort of lift up our hands and we raise our center of gravity, and then we think about going forward. There's this real temptation to tilt forward to offload the rear leg and then come back and rock back. However, you'll note how much imbalance that creates throughout the frame. Even if we succeed at achieving our aim here and getting the weight over here, there's usually such imbalance engendered by that that we're not ready for the subsequent moment or moments. So instead, we want to think about our balance in that spherical nature. So while we are in the process of rotating those palms, we sink and we lift. So we're dropping down in the shoulder blade, we're lifting up out of that pelvis and that sternum. And if we really had a shearing force that was bringing us up here in front, if this was coming up here and we were sinking down in the back of those shoulders as we discussed, when we go to come forward, this upward energy or this lift out of the front of our torso would keep us, it would somewhat inhibit this idea of leaning forward. Because in order to lean forward, I end up being a little concave and I end up collapsing in the pelvis. But if I keep that pelvis pulled up and I stay lifted out of that sternum, when we go to move forward, we stay upright. And then our balance comes from simultaneously sinking down through that tailbone and dropping back onto that rear leg, emptying that front leg. We're still here. So the goal in Tai Chi is to be able to fully express while remaining grounded. And the only way that's going to occur is if we have sort of this notion of spherical balance, if we're able to broaden our consideration to include more than one way of thinking, more than one effort, more than one direction of force. Thank you for joining us for lesson number 12 of our step-by-step Tai Chi instruction. We hope that you enjoyed yourself, that you found something useful along the way, and ideally, these lessons are starting to make connections outside of the classroom and outside of your physical practice into the way you carry yourself into your day. Thanks so much.